Hello and welcome to this episode of Military Mutterings, where I, Jack Fletcher, and my good friend,
Me, Gavin Jansen.
shall be discussing a rather legendary vehicle, the BMP-1, the second infantry fighting vehicle. Yes, the second,
Hmm.
because the world's first infantry fighting vehicle was actually the Schützenpanzer HS-30, which came about in 1958. So remember that. This is actually the second IFV. However, it did bring about a brand new standard to the West, and this magnificent machine has. Well, Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, so the primary requirement for this vehicle, so what they wanted from it, was to have a vehicle that had good speed and good armament and the ability for all the squad members to fire from within the vehicle. That's rather important for it too. The vehicle also had to be protected to the crew, so it had to be able to withstand 50 caliber machine gun fire, maybe even 20 to 23 millimeter autocannon fire from the frontal arcs. So this is disregard the side, but just frontally. So that was also very important. But the thing is with the BMP, there's a huge amount of history with it, and also different type of prototype variants of where it all started. And it's pretty safe to say we don't have the time to do that in one of these videos. So I'll just cut straight to the chase. The original prototype was built in 1964, and that later followed with the improved Object 765 in 1965. But the actual vehicle was put into service in 1966 and was given the designation BMP-1. Now, something to point out there is the amount of vehicles that were built. So Jack, you just mentioned the Schützenpanzer. How many were built of that?
Just over 2,000.
Well, to put it in comparison, Russia alone made 20,000 BMP-1s. And something like Czechoslovakia has 18,000 on their own. So this dwarfs the amount of vehicles that were built with the Schützenpanzer.
Yes, and then you've got China with 3,000, India with 800s, and a bunch of other nations with some knocking about, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why a lot of people see this vehicle as like the first primary infantry fighting vehicle, because there was just so many of them built, and
I
it really
suppose.
set a standard for it.
Yeah, so, and I suppose it did not only set a standard, but it was a new standard because the old standard really was chuck 5 men in, put a 20 millimeter cannon on it, and some versions. I mean, I'm talking about the HS-30 once again, and some variants chuck a 106 millimeter recorder's rifle on there and jumps a good one. But this vehicle, and if you don't mind, I'm going to get into the standard BMP-1
Oh yeah, we can go right along.
was powered by a 300 horsepower UTD-20 diesel engine, which could, well, let's just say that this vehicle had a pretty nice horsepower to ton ratio of 23.1 tons. No, sorry, 22.7. I mean, it depends on which object we're going for here, but the standard version, 22.7 horsepower per ton, and this thing, as a result, could go rather nicely in terms of speed. And in fact, if you just bear with me, I will find the speed rather quickly here.
I think it was
And in
something
terms
around
of
the 60 km/h mark.
yeah, so it could go about 65 kilometers an hour on road, 45 kilometers an hour off road, and for those of the Imperial variety, that is 40 miles per hour on road, 28 miles per hour off road, 7 to 8 kilometers per hour, or 4.3 to 5 miles per hour in water, because this vehicle is amphibious.
To add to the list of things that it can do.
Yes, what can't the BMP-1 do? In fact, not only is the BMP-1 armed with a 73 millimeter to a 28 Grom low pressure smoothbore semi-automatic gun, as well as a 7.62 millimeter PKT coaxial machine gun, but it's also armed with anti-tank guided missiles. Now, consider the 3-man crew and the 8 squad members at the back. are going up against, some fortified positions, and all of a sudden there's a tank there. For whatever reason, there's a tank there, or a heavily armored vehicle. This thing can take those vehicles out because the standard BMP-1 could carry 4 9M14 Malyutka missiles.
Which I believe are wire-guided anti-tank missiles, weren't they?
Yes, I believe they are indeed. So that's a pretty nice. It packs a punch. This vehicle definitely packs the punch that was needed by the Soviets at this time, because although the Soviets had some brilliant tanks, you're looking at, in terms of the tanks that they had vehicles such as that such as the T-54, T-55s, by this point the T-62 as well. And we're even now getting into the T-64 territory. In fact, these two tanks came out at around the same time. T-64B coming out in 1966 as well. So you've got a really nice force to be reckoned here with, mass-produced, really powerful tanks. And at this time, to put in comparison, we, the British, were still operating, I believe, not only Centurion, I think we were still operating those, but you also had Chieftain Mark 11 specifically as well. Chieftain, or was it Mark 11? I don't know. But Chieftain was still in use. So you have T-64B, BMP-1 against Chieftain. And not only that, but other NATO countries. We've got the French with the AMX tanks. We've got Germany, who had just introduced Leopard 1. America, I believe, had M60 at this point. Yes, America had M60. So these are quite advanced vehicles, but these are incredibly advanced vehicles, and I believe we shall go on to one of the advancements of the BMP-1. So, Kevin, if you would please.
Yes. So, we are now going to get into some more variants, and I'm going to talk about the BMP-1P. Now, what you see before you is actually not the tank, of course, well, duh, but what you actually see before you is the new missile that it was going to be able to carry. So, one of the big changes they made for the 1P was that the firepower is going to be enhanced. And they added a pintle mounting for either the 9M111 Fagot missile. I hope I pronounced that right. It's very tempting to say the other word, but I'm not going to do that.
Yes.
Or it could also carry the 9M113 Concourse ATGM. But this seriously improved the armor penetration and the extended weapon range for the vehicle. So instead of it being like the sort of older, earlier wire-guided missiles, this was a proper anti-tank missile. And around this time, the BMP-1 became a real threat to basically any tank. But also, a whole bunch of other things were changed, like a new fire extinguisher systems to be used against napalm, should it ever be covered by that. Because keep in mind, the BMP-1 was going to be on the front lines most of the time, so whatever was going to be thrown at the infantry around it was also going to hit itself. There was also an additional machine gun firing port added to the left side of the hull and at the front of the turret, so it just got more of everything basically. Better firepower, more systems, more weaponry.
Did it not also receive some additional side armor in some cases?
Yeah, in some cases, but I do believe it differs a lot. But actually, you're going to talk about another version that did increase more armor,
wonderful.
didn't it?
Yeah, so now either the P or the D, which we're getting into now, was developed as an upgrade in response to the Yom Kippur War. I forget which version it was. However, what we're witnessing with the BMP-1D is, all of these are using the same engine. They can have, same amount of crewmen, etc. But the D variant was able to equip either the Malyutka or the Conquer's missile, which again really improves the killing capability. However, it also went up to weighing 14.5 tons, which, considering the first vehicle was 13.2 tons, the first in-service vehicle, whilst that might not seem like a lot, that can, that might affect the vehicle's overall performance, especially with its speed and handling. I mean, could you imagine what it will be like in water? That's probably where the 4.3 miles an hour in water comes from. And although it's an amphibious vehicle, by God, it's slow. If you're
Yeah.
crossing anything more than, if you're crossing anything more than a stream, you might as well, have a little nap, I suppose, because you're going to be in there a while.
But didn't most of the weight just come from additional armor plating they added to the thing? Because
Yes, I believe it did.
I believe it was mostly for like close support sort of variant used to the Afghanistan war.
Yes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that this variant was amphibious because of the additional weight.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
Yes, which would make sense, of course.
Well, should
However,
we?
we.
Hmm?
Hmm? Um, yes, this happens commonly in our standard conversations.
Oh
Yes,
yes.
that would be the logical assumption. What were you going to say, Kevin?
Now should we move along to some final variants and whatnot?
Oh, yes, I believe you're quite excited to discuss these.
because I love these.
Could I
Like,
just ask,
mm,
bottom right, is that a CV90 gun that I see?
yes, it is. But hold on to your horses. We'll get to it. So what I like the most about the BMP is just it was just exported all over the place, and everybody decided to do their own thing with it. That's why I really love it. So, for example, on the bottom left, I do believe this is still a Russian version, but you can see an armored recovery variant of the BMP. So screw any sort of anti-tank firepower, let's have something that can carry other things around. But yeah, bottom right, which you were very excited for, this is actually a Polish BWP-40. Now the BWP-1 was actually just a Polish-made BMP-1. So this BWP-40 is a BMP-1 and a CV-90 hybrid. So it's got the CV-90 turret on the BMP-1 hull. Only one prototype was finished, but I just think it's a very interesting idea.
I think it's a wonderful idea considering the fact that at this time people are using their BMP2s and BMP3s and they've all got autocannons, so why not fit an incredibly good autocannon on, very the very nice 40 millimeter cannon on the CV90 mounted onto a BMP1 chassis would surely frighten quite a few individuals, I believe. Considering they expect, oh, it's only got a short range 73 millimeter cannon, but oh no, this has got a very nice 40 millimeter cannon.
Yeah, exactly. And some other things that you see here before you. On the top right, we've got the Afghanistan BMP-1 that basically has its main turret replaced with a ZU-23-2 anti-aircraft gun mount, which has some very potent AA weaponry, I must be honest. And on
Mm,
the top left, we see a South African BMP-1 with a unmanned multi-weapon platform, armed with a 30mm 2A72 autocannon, and also some free Denel Ignoé ATGMs. Very interesting name on the left hand side of the vehicle. So even in modern day, the BMP-1s are making their stand.
yes, and what I actually find quite interesting is that with anti-aircraft guns, the BMP doesn't have to actually shoot down aircraft. It can also be used in urban situations. I mean, for example, look at the Shilkers when they were used in urban situations.
Oh yeah.
Sure, they've only got 8-9 millimeters of armor, but
But
quite
also,
quite potent.
if you're going up against an enemy that only has, well, lightly armored vehicles like a BMP-1, then one of those 23mm autocannons is more than enough. So there's really
That
no
is very
need to
true.
have proper anti-tank weaponry if you're facing a lesser enemy, so to say.
And not only that, but having what the South Africans have, essentially a dual purpose
Yeah.
infantry fighting vehicle, that's or multi-purpose even, not just dual but multi-purpose, that's rather not only impressive, but that can still be quite potent even on today's battlefields.
Yeah.
Especially since they wouldn't be facing enemies with ultra modern main battle tanks. For the job that is intended to do, that is a stellar vehicle.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's just the legacy of the BMP-1. It just adapts to whatever you want it to do.
Yes, and that's what I really like about this vehicle, actually, and that's why I was quite looking forward to making this video, because there is so much to actually say about the BMP-1. I mean, we could be here for hours on end just discussing this one particular vehicle and all of its different variants, because there are dozens of variants around the world of this vehicle. However, we don't have time to go into all of them. Yet, just to put into perspective, there are even command variants of the BMP.
Oh, there are like command variants, artillery support variants, recon variants. There's just so much. And that's just Russia alone. We can go all the way into other nations too.
Exactly.
But I think we've wrapped it up quite nicely here.
Yes, I think we have actually. Do you have any further notes about this amazing vehicle?
No, I don't. Not really. I think we've said most of the important stuff. So yeah.
Mm. Yes, well, in that case, this concludes today's episode of Military Mutterings, and join us next week where we shall be discussing something of the naval variety. So stay tuned to our social media to find out what to expect. And this is coming from both myself and Kevin. Have a good week.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yes, have a good week, everyone.
Take care.